Welcome to the Philosophy Podcast. Now, why do we call it philosophy? It's the combination of the word sales and philosophy put into one. Philosophy is a way of life that sales professionals and entrepreneurs practice with the purpose to make the world a better place from the customer's perspective. Today, I'm super excited to welcome Chris Do, who is a Emmy award-winning designer, director, CEO, chief strategist of Blind, and founder of the Futur, an online education platform with the mission of teaching 1 billion people how to make a living doing what they love. And Chris, you identify yourself as a loud introvert, and I love that. And welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today. And anything else that I missed there about your introduction you'd like to tell the world?
No, you did such a great job. I don't want to ruin it. Thank you so much.
So Chris, you and I met last year. You came down to Miami. You're based out of California, and we met through my brother, Hector Garcia, where you guys have also in the interwebs have been able to run into some common themes that you're both fans of. You're both fans of Blair Enns, someone who I also admire, that talks about the concept of value pricing. I guess you guys were jamming, started doing some Clubhouse stuff together, some YouTubing, and then you came down to Miami and you wanted a venue to teach your pro group, which was like a group of people that you mentor and stuff like that. And I happened to just sort of like, slip myself in there. Hector was like, "Hey man, you should come and check this guy out." And I totally like acted like I was part of your group already, like participating. And but we had such a cool conversation. And I just wanted to tell you, one of the most impactful things for me in that experience after hearing you speak and share was when I kind of caught you in a break room. You, me, and Hector are talking, and I asked you like this super like deep question about like the way that you interview people, and you paused and looked at me and you went, "You should start a podcast." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And so I did. So thank you for that nudge and that inspiration. Always had it in the back of my head, but someone of your caliber, your experience, to give me that was very complimentary. So I just want to say thanks. And is there anything that maybe you remembered out of that meeting that was interesting to you, or Miami as a whole?
Yeah, there's several things, but about you specifically was the kind of questions you're asking spoke volumes to me because you're referencing specific books or ideas. So it seemed like we're reading the same books, we're thinking the same things. And I can usually tell when someone has that really curious mind by the way that they ask the questions. They don't ask basic yes or no questions. They don't ask questions that you can just quickly type in on Google and get the answer to. You're asking questions that only by us having a conversation and dialogue could that be illuminated. And immediately I thought, this is a skill set. This is a skill set, obviously, because this is very natural to you, but it needed to find a different platform. And I think that's important for anybody out there who doesn't understand this yet. Everybody, regardless of the business that you're in, if you're in tax accounting, if you're in home construction, if you're a gardener or landscaper, you just don't know it yet, but you're a media company. This is how the battle for clients and customers and the hearts and souls will be won in the 21st century. You have to make media. So if you're not making media, someone else with less skill, talent, or ethics is going to build that relationship with customers and clients, and they'll get them for the short term. And that's what's going to happen. They're going to build those relationships just because you're not willing to play in the game of content marketing.
Yeah. And the one thing that you say often in many of your videos that I probably obsessively watch way too much is one, we are in a world that is information rich and attention poor. And I love that combination of concepts, because it's true. I was reading that especially short form video consumption is increasing by the minute, and anybody in any industry that is trying to get business, get customers, if they're not getting in their media game, they're really far behind. So keeping up with the trends and what our consumers are telling us, especially new generations, millennials, Gen Z, so on and so forth, that's not going to go away. If anything, I think about my brother's kids, and I'm sure your son, which you reference a lot, like how much consumption on their phone, on their mobile, and how they make purchasing decisions. I mean, they can watch someone say, "Oh, look at this cool thing that does this in the kitchen," and immediately you swipe up and they buy it, and it comes through Amazon. And that's just the world that we live in. And so it's a great point.
Yeah. So just to put a pin on that, My oldest son, who's here with us between high school and college, he's going to go to college pretty soon. He bought a pair of slippers so to walk inside the house, and they're really beefy looking. They look very cushiony and supportive. And he's like, "Dad, this is the highest reviewed TikTok sandals or slippers that you can buy. Try them. Like, check them out. They're so nice, and they don't cost that much." And I'm sitting there thinking, who approved this purchase? So he was so effusive about his love for this, and the product lived up to the TikTok standards, which I don't even know what they are, but just to prove to your point, which is there's a lot of social proof that triggers purchasing decisions. And being an influencer means you have the ability to influence other people's decisions.
Absolutely. That's very well put. And there you go. There's a perfect exhibit of what we just talked about. So I know that conversation can go into a world of its own. But today, I thank you so much for being here, and I'm so excited to talk to you about one of my favorite topics, which is sales. And I know that you are a teacher, a creative artist, probably maybe by birth, and that's sort of like someone who's creative at heart, and especially to your audience, who typically, I want to say all, but many identify themselves as introverts, and selling is typically comes more natural to folks who are more extrovert. And I probably identify myself more as an extrovert. I don't care to go into a room to talk to anyone. I have zero fear. A lot of that is a learned behavior. Yeah, there's this one passage that you talked about, which I absolutely love. One of my favorite from your book, A Pocket Full of Dough. Look how this book damaged it is because of how much I read it. I had to
I know you
tape
read
it
it a
together.
lot. Yes.
Yeah. And it talks about talking to strangers.
Yeah.
Right. That one passage. And just really quick, for someone who might be an introvert, talking to strangers could be nerve-wracking. But for someone like me, it was a learned behavior because my dad used to take Hector and I, right, to like a Marlins game, Miami Marlins, Florida Marlins back then, or somewhere in public. And he would talk to everyone. It didn't matter. Like, he was just like, "Where are you from? If it was the janitor in the bathroom, if it was the waiter." And so obviously as kids, we were like, "Dad, I'm bored. I want to go home," whatever.
Right.
But as an adult, it was just normal to talk to strangers, right? But maybe not all people know that. So I think that's a very important idea of when it comes to sales, it's sometimes having the courage to be outgoing and in communicating. And so I guess as you hear that, what resonates with you in your journey of how you've had to transform, the way you interact with people, and how important of a role sales has in what you've done in your career?
So the first thing that you had said, which I believe to be true, and I think there's some numbers and statistics that back this up, that a lot of designers and creative who self-identify as artists are introverted. And I think one of the reasons why we choose to go into visual arts is because we don't have to speak to anybody. I remember taking an aptitude test in high school, and based on the way I answered the questions, they told me I should become a stockbroker or an accountant. It's because I like to work with computers and I don't get joy from talking to humans. So I was like, okay, I guess I will be one of those two things. Not that that's horrible, but that's my personality type. And so what happens is a lot of creative types tend to be very shy, and they want to sit in front of their computer. And this is what makes them great, which is they have the ability to go deep and focus in on a task, where I think sometimes extroverts sitting by themselves for too long really is very draining for them. So you need to get out to recharge your batteries and be around humans. And so what happens is inevitably, if you run a business, a creative business, you don't have a lot of business because you don't really know how to build relationships with people. The idea of going to a client event or a function or party makes you want to throw up in your mouth. And I say that from experience. Every time we would have a big agency client in town because we're working on the commercial, I would be invited to dinner by my own team, and I would say, "No, you guys go have a great dinner." And the bill would come back like $1,000, $1,500, $2,000. I'm like, "Dang, you guys are eating well. You eat better than I eat," and it's an expense, right? So
Right.
I hated that, but I started to learn later on when I started working with clients directly, and I didn't want this layer between myself and the client. I didn't want salespeople, executive producers, and producer types to do what I thought was most natural, which is you are your best salesperson. So
Right.
when you're in front of someone, they see your enthusiasm, they understand your experience and your knowledge and the way you look at the world, and that sells better than anything that someone else who doesn't know and understand that can do for you. Now, a salesperson compared to zero is 1,000% better, but a salesperson compared to a trained, motivated, inspired individual who is actually in the business himself or herself is going to be way better than your salesperson. And that's a skill I needed to learn and adapt. And I spent years developing the skill set, and I got more and more comfortable with this. So now that I totally understand what it's like to be a person who doesn't like to be out there in the world, and someone who has to perform a function in terms of generating leads for your business. So that's kind of like my journey into sales. And what I didn't realize, Carlos, is that I host rooms with sales experts, people who literally teach other people how to sell. And I start to understand their style so vastly different than my own. And I think, now this could just be my own opinion, kind of prejudice, but I think I'm a better salesperson than these people are. And I would love to talk to you about that, if that is of interest to you.
Sure. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So what I notice is that salespeople go with certain pressure points and triggers to get the other person to say yes. And they will use a number of different persuasive rhetorical skills to frame a discussion, a solution, or something like that. And even the most sophisticated ones feel a little bit aggressive to me and a little bit pushy. And I find that the best way to sell someone something is not to sell them at all.
I agree with that 100%.
Right? And it's maybe it's a nuanced version, but I really think it's a different way. And I'm a big believer in this, because this now makes it much more accessible to people in my community, the creative community. So what I say to them is, really your only two jobs when you're talking to a prospect is to help provide clarity by asking questions, not by telling what to do, and inspiring them to make a decision. What we don't realize is, as people trying to get business from someone, that making a decision, especially when it surrounds a big commitment of money or time, it's a scary thing, because we don't want to make the wrong decisions. And so what you're doing is, if you're pushing a specific product or solution, the person is going to increase their feelings of distrust. They start to suspect that you have an agenda, that you don't really care about them. And they might even resist it more the harder you push something.
I couldn't agree more. And I'll kind of tell you my perspective of what you just shared is, I usually try to go into a conversation, because I don't consider it a sales conversation. It's more of just like a discovery, or, I'm just really trying to help the person that's in front of me. And first is there a fit? Are we a personality fit? And does your problem fit with what I can solve? So what I usually try to do is I try to ask questions to eliminate the things that I don't want to do or I don't know how to do. So I usually frame up the beginning of the conversation with, I'd love to ask you, if, with your permission, just a few questions just to understand, so that what I can't do or what I won't do, so that, we make the best use of our time. Would that be okay with you? And that just immediately takes their defense mechanism, lowers it, right? Yeah. Actually, in your Futur group networking, when we were doing the quick rounds, I was obsessed with telling everyone, I'm a sales coach. I do this and that. My full intention of going into this group is not to get any business out of this. It's 100% selfishly for me to learn, and just me positioning that. Everybody was so oh my God, but what do you do? But I want to know what you do. It's almost like saying, I don't want to sell you, makes people want to actually say, no, but I am interested in what you do. And so it sort of creates this interesting effect. The less you try, you're just being your full authentic self, and with the intention to help, people will want to do more, want to trust you more.
Yeah, you just told us a story that perfectly demonstrates the whole retreat and follow philosophy by Blair Enns, which is, we need to test the commitment level of the other person by taking a half step back, by you saying, I'm not here to sell anything. That then is a retreat, saying, I don't want any business from you. I just want to have a conversation and learn more about you. That piques the other person's curiosity. And they're like, wait, what? Wait, tell me more about what you do again. Right? I need help with sales. I need a coach. And then they start to lean in. The opposite is also true. When you pursue, the natural reaction to the other person is to run away, to recoil. And you think about like anything, like when a cat arches its back and the tail goes up and it hisses, it's telling you be prepared, step back. When an animal like opens up its mane or its feather, you know it's about to strike. The same thing with a cobra. So in a way, I want you to think of yourself like that. When you try to sell something to someone, you are the cobra opening up whatever that part of the cobra is, saying, I'm about to strike. If you don't step back, I will
Mhm.
strike. And then the other person's like, oh, I don't feel good about this. You don't even know anything about me or my problem.
Yeah. And being present and, to your point, active listening and reading the room, reading your audience. You have to be agile to be able to respond to the micro expressions, whether it's
100%.
tonality, body language, etc. So gosh, we can jam about this for hours. I've got a couple of questions I want to ask you. This is a little bit more about you. I
Okay.
wanted to make the theme, the title of this podcast full of dough, because I'm really just interested about, like, in your brain, sort of the mechanism of your thinking or your approach, or again, your journey to polish yourself so well. And number one, the way that you communicate, especially you come off very compelling. You also are very good at choosing the words. And I told you this before, right? At how you frame up concepts, how you also recap concepts when you interview people. And those are effective, really highly advanced communication skills. So I guess if you were to share maybe best practices for folks to become really effective communicators in the world of sales, what would be a couple of tips or ideas you could share?
I think the one thing is you could slow down your pace, which is really important. It makes it everything you say sound more thoughtful and deliberate. Because we know, let's take the opposite. Like when my kids are excited about something, they're running, Dad, you won't believe it. You can't see this. And then that happened. And then Billy hit Jenny and then everything exploded. That's a lot of excitement. And for me, I think that excitement is sometimes good and necessary. And you want to inspire people, so you can't always go at them with a really slow and low voice, but that starts to raise our heart rate and it's all elevated, and we're not thinking clearly now, right? Because we feel like adrenaline is coming in and something exciting is about to happen. And so I think the first thing you want to do is you just want to slow down your pace. What that helps you to do is also for you to find your words. I think we're in a culture now where we think that we have to fill in every gap of dead air, that silence is killing, like a deadly killer for people, and so they want to fill it in immediately. Or sometimes the best thing that you can say when you're talking to a client is, that is a really good question, which deserves a better answer than what I can give you on the spot. With your permission, can I circle back with you and talk to my team and find out something? Because I don't want to tell you something that isn't correct. I can't tell you how many times I've had to use that and how much respect I gained by doing that. Because one thing that you pointed out in a different way is, when you tell people what you don't know, when you tell them what you do know, it gives it more credence. Alex Ramosi said this on stage. He's like, what you do is you go on stage and you tell people, I'm not good at 3 things, but I'm good at this one thing.
Right.
It makes
The
that one thing so much more believable, right?
Sure. It's got this psychological effect of
It does.
you're showing vulnerability and that you're human and you don't know everything. And so people connect with that, because I think we all don't know everything. So that there's like, like he's like me,
Yeah.
I can connect with that. Oh, but he knows that. Oh, okay. So he's kind of follow that trail. I saw that video. That was a really good
It was.
presentation of that.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. So slowing
Slow it
down
down.
the pace is
Hmm.
like the good one to get started. So in your opinion, outside of that, what is the most important skill that one should master to get better at selling, and more on the part of just winning the business? Because I think a lot of people might get stuck in that part. When I posted a video recently on my reel, and I was looking at the captions that got the most views, and I was looking at my analytics, and when I used the phrase close more deals, I finally surpassed like a 10,000 view mark on it. But everything else I had has not gone beyond it. So closing more deals tends to be sort of the thing in the world of sales that a lot of people want to achieve.
Do you also try to use, have you tried get the sale, get more clients?
I haven't in captions, but
Okay.
I do say it in my language. But
Yeah, try that as well to A/B test it because I'm curious what you come up with because I need to also use similar language and we're always exploring that. So that also points out to something, which is we can talk about what it is that we do or an action that you can take, but most people care about the results. So I want to close more deals. That seems like a pretty good result. How to do sales? That's an action that you take, but not a result, right? Or triple your business or get more clients, get more high paying clients. That's ultimately the result of you becoming better at being a salesperson. Learn to ask better questions. It comes down to that. And I know that sounds really simple because we all know how to ask questions, but let's just say that there's the black belt of asking questions and there's the white belt. And most people are at that white belt level. I'll give you a couple of examples. I'm going to use my children in this, right? My youngest son, his name is Matthias, and he's a very curious human being. He's an artist. So he likes to ask lots of questions like, why'd they do that, Dad? Why did this happen? And where did this come from? And he's asking questions that I cannot possibly know the answer to. And this is how his mind works. And you can see that a lot of young children ask these kinds of questions. Why is this? Why is that? It's like, I really don't know. I can't speak to the motivations of someone else. Like why someone would cut you off the road. Maybe they're in a rush. I have no idea. So those are okay questions. Other questions that are just okay are yes or no questions. They're binary and they have a very either or kind of scenario where you either answer yes or no or true or false or something like that. And why those aren't great questions in the beginning is because you presume to know it's either A or B. What if it's something totally different? So if you ask someone, do you like peaches or apples? How do you even know I like fruit? How do you know I'm even hungry at this moment? So you want to ask open-ended questions, but are directed towards something down the line. So an
right.
open-ended question is, how are you doing today? But that's not directed towards anything. And so it's asking open yet focused questions is the magical key that allows you to get the clients to speak about the things that are going to be relevant to both you and them to help you do your job better.
Yeah. As I hear you say that, I think about kind of my favorite questions to ask in any general discovery question. I think the first one is, so what would you like to accomplish? Just kind of open ended, but focused on like, what are your priorities? What do you want to get out of our time together? Obviously, some of that with framing up, hey, here's what I think we could do with our conversation. I was thinking we can explore A, B, and C. So you could also stay in a space where you're both sharing the objectives and align where what their objectives are, yours are, you kind of focus on, narrow it down. And then the other one is towards kind of the end. I like to ask, is there something you'd like me to know that we haven't discussed about how to move forward? And that there are so many surprises that no matter how many questions I would have, pre-planned for the conversation I thought I could ask, something random comes up and I'm just like, oh, okay. I had no idea. Like I had one that goes, well, I'm going to go on maternity leave next week. So I'm actually going to hand this off to another person. So you're going to work with them. I'm like, well, that's nice to know. If we're
Yeah.
going to work together, everything I just did with you, I have to restart that with the other person. So you're absolutely right about asking those focused, open, but focused questions.
Yes, Chris Voss writes about in his book Never Split the Difference. He calls them calibrated questions. And I think that's a clue. And I think it's a branding play the way he wrote calibrated questions because he's the FBI negotiator. It has this kind of
Right.
sniper military kind of vibe to it. Somebody
Right.
clever is like, let's just call it not just a question, but a calibrated question. And that's really important because what happens is I was just doing some coaching yesterday with like a founder and four of their employees and just talking about if a client says this, how would you respond? And they ask open-ended questions, but I can tell how open they are in that it's going to take you half an hour to get to the truth, like what you need to know. And so you need to you have to have a hypothesis. This is my theory here. You have a hypothesis, okay? So in sales, my hypothesis, the client and I are talking because the client A has a problem they would like to make go away. B, they understand that to make the problem go away, they have to spend money. And C, they believe seeing something or hearing something about what it is that we do might be the solution for them. That's my hypothesis. So my opening question is going to direct them towards that so that I can eliminate some things like you said. It's great. Like I think the way we look at it is you're a detective, you arrive on the scene of a crime. There's a dead body in the library, and there's some 12 suspects and possible murder weapons in different rooms, right? Like it's a game of Clue. And so
Right.
you think, based on these clues that I'm seeing, I'm going to make some assumptions, and I'm going to test those assumptions right away. I'm going to check to see if I'm wrong, right? And so I'm going to ask a question. So one of my opening questions, if I'm doing sales for service, I would ask them, is there a big problem that you'd like to get solved that you haven't been able to up until now? And they're not going to tell me problems in their marriage or their house or plumbing issues. Those could be really big problems because they, as a human being, have contextual understanding. Like they understand the context of what we're talking about. And so they
Right.
know that I'm not a surgeon. So telling me about cataracts in your eye or something is not going to be relevant. So they automatically start to think about you and how you might be able to help them. And that's a big open-ended question that is focused on like a big problem that you'd like to get solved, because people have problems they don't want to solve. People have small problems that they want solved. I'm not interested in those. So I'm trying to eliminate the quadrant of things that we can think about so that we can focus in on what's going to make the biggest impact on their business.
That's huge. And I think about the follow-up to that question being, what impact does that problem have? What does it cost you money? Is it just frustration? Is it
Right.
time, whatever, peace of mind, etc.? And it's, again, those are the things that differentiate someone who's having a regular monotone yes or no close-ended question conversation to someone who's truly in there to put themselves in the shoes of that prospect, that customer, and really try to live or see the world through their eyes, and then try to solve it with their point of view or their expertise, so that they can get to the happy place, the happy ending part of that interaction and that relationship that you're trying to build.
Yeah, you're doing something great too by following up that with that question, because you're highlighting the pain that they feel around it by asking more clarifying questions like, is this a revenue problem, or is this a point of frustration? Is this ruining your marriage? Whatever it is, what you want to do before you start offering solutions to anything is to help them to relive the past. Kevin Daly writes about this in his book, The Socratic Selling. He's like, help them to understand the pain, because the more clearly they understand the pain, the more motivated they are to make that pain go away. So it's a duality, right? So first, before we go to the future, we have to go revisit the past. We need to understand what your frustration is, where it causes most grief for you. And it could be a multitude of things. And every once in a while, when you go back there, you start to realize that their problem isn't the real problem. It's just a symptom of the problem. And so that's why it's kind of important to dig deeper. Think about yourself like you're a doctor. Somebody comes in and they tell you they have pain and they think it's, I need knee surgery, doc. And then later on you realize, actually, it's not that at all. It's a diet thing. And you're having inflammation in your knee because you're eating too much X, Y, and Z. But let's do some blood work to make sure. Let's test this hypothesis. And if you
Right.
start thinking like that, it'll start to change the way you have conversations with prospects.
Yeah. And in your world, with folks like in the creative world or experts or specialists, the diagnostic would kind of align with that, right? That entry product where it's like, hey, I don't want to get fully committed into saying what's it going to cost you to solve this problem.
Right.
Let's first run some tests, and let's do a diagnostic, and obviously figure something out, maybe low commitment, and then
That's
again
right.
figure out further, as are we both a fit? Can I solve your problem, and is what I offer going to give you the solutions that you're looking for?
Yeah. What you said is the perfect example to use for if you're building something that has many phases and where the finished product could be actually very complicated and expensive. There's two things I can think of. One is if you're building a custom home for somebody, or two is if you're building a website. They're really not that different. There's very similar language as well, right? So let's go with you're building a custom home for somebody, because I think most people understand the process. You wouldn't just have a conversation with a client. They're like, okay, we could spend $3 million to build our dream home. And you're great, I'll start building tomorrow. That would be a disaster for a number of different reasons. So what you want to do is you're going to take an iterative approach. You're going to show them drawing sketches, something that's very loose in the beginning. and you might pull together materials. And so you're designing and building with the client, not for them. It's a different relationship. So you're standing shoulder to shoulder versus them standing in front of you and telling you what to do. And you enroll the client. And so let's try to figure out, even if we did a mock-up, let's say we go to the site where you own the property, and we can mock up with stakes and string and pull and say, like, this is kind of what we're thinking. Walk through the space and feel it with me. And I know that not enough creative people do this. They just say to themselves, I'm the expert. I know what I'm doing. Look at my portfolio. Look at my body of work. And just by that alone, I should not have to sell. And I should assume, or I assume that you know what it is that I do and how I do what I do. And they just rush to the sale, and therefore sometimes they get, but more often than not, they alienate the client. It's like, wait, slow down here. I'm confused. And confusion leads to, I'm scared. I'm scared you're not the right person. I'm scared you're going to give me something I don't want. I'm scared this is going to take too long. And very few people buy in a state of fear.
Fear or impulse or excitement or but many in fear. Chris, I'm going to transition to a question that might be a bit more on the personal side, because I'm just curious about your journey into, your growth, and many that follow you or many that want to get to your level of success might have to overcome a lot of personal obstacles, internal obstacles in their mind. And so the question is, what is the most impactful feedback you've ever received? And what did you do about it to help you where you are today?
All right. So it's one of these things that happen with my wife and all. Once you're married for a really long time, you start to get really short with each other, like short in communication, short in views, and all that stuff. And so my wife's like, honey, my computer isn't working. Can you work on it for me? And she's one of those types of people. And sometimes I get this way where you just do your thing. I'm going to leave the room and I want it to be fixed. I don't want to know anything about how it was done. I don't want to learn anything. I just want you to fix it. And so I'm like, great. So she goes, I'm going to go on an errand. So I'm on a computer and I troubleshoot and I quickly solve the problem. And then I realized, my gosh, my wife has so many files strewn about on the desktop. It's just a total disaster. Personal files, business files, accounting records, signed documents from the legal team, whatever it is. It's like, you know what? I think she needs help here. I'm going to organize this for her. And anybody who's listening to the story, if you've been married or in any kind of relationship, you already know where the story is going. So I create personal and business photos, documents, whatever. I just organize it all. I'm like, this is clean. It's so clean. My OCD nature is satisfied, satiated. I'm like, great. She's going to come home and be like, honey, did you fix the computer? I'm like, yep. And then she's going to look at the folders like, oh my gosh, I have like someone who loves me so much to organize these files. But that's not what happened, Carlos. She's like, did you fix the computer? I'm like, yep. And she goes, where are my files? And not in a friendly tone, like, where are my files? I'm like, they're there. I put everything, and I I don't need to receive a lot of credit for this, honey. And they're all there. And she goes, why would you do that? I can't find my files now. This is so frustrating. I want you to put it all back. And I was like, just taken aback a little bit. And I was thinking, this ungrateful woman that I married, I fixed the computer. I got no thanks for that. I got no kiss, no hug, no nothing. And on top of that, she's yelling at me for trying to help. In my world, it's like when people try to help you, you can just politely decline and you're like, can you put it back? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to ask you to do that. So can you undo it? But she was like fire and brimstone. At this time, I'm working with a family therapist. Her name is Joan. And Joan's amazing. So I was like, oh my God, I can't wait to talk to Joan about this, because she's going to come in and she's going to tell my wife, because it's couples therapy, how wrong she is and how much of a saint I am, and she should kiss my feet. So we get in there, we tell the story, and she turns to me, she's like, why would you do that? In a very friendly tone. I said, because for me, being a husband means I love and support my wife and do little things that people don't ask you to do, to show that you love them. She said this, and this is where the gem comes in. She said, so you want to be helpful, right? I said, yes. She goes, it's important for what you do to be perceived as being helpful. So whether you think it's helpful or not is irrelevant. So the person who's receiving your help needs to perceive it as being helpful. So what happens here is oftentimes in relationships, whether it's business or personal, the other person doesn't have enough time or sometimes the skills to communicate to you clearly what they want. So in that shorthand, we interpret, we fill in the gaps, and we make a lot of assumptions. So she says, the next time that your wife asks you to do something, and it will happen again, just guarantee it'll happen, I want you to say something. I said, okay. So great. She told me what to say. Next time my wife's like, hey, honey, can you help me do something? I got to go again. You know, it's one of those rushed pieces of communication. I said, I'd love to help you, but I want to make sure what I'm doing is perceived as being helpful. So I need some clarity around this. Do you have time now, or would later be better? She goes, I can't do it now. So later comes around, she doesn't really need to tell me. She just does it herself. So I'm like, okay, I got out of it. I fulfilled my duty as a husband, and I didn't get myself into trouble. And my wife looks at me like kind of funny with one eyebrow raised. She goes, you've been talking to Joan, haven't you?
That's an awesome story. And it's such a universal lesson that could be applied in business as well, in any interpersonal, relationships, whether it's coworker, partner, customer, etc., being perceived as helpful. That's amazing, man.
Yeah, you know what happens, let's bring it into the business realm here. A lot of creatives, again, make assumptions about the website that you want, or the house you want built, or the word mark you want them to, or they want you to design. We make assumptions about this all the time. We don't spend enough time talking to clients, and maybe some of it's their fault, but almost all of it is always your fault when it doesn't work out as a service provider. And we don't have the language, the skills, or even the concept to spend time, not just in the sales process and understanding the client's problems, but post-sale, how to deliver upon those promises that you made in the sales cycle, so that you deliver what you're supposed to.
So I want to maybe ask you this final question, and then maybe we could talk a little bit about how folks can follow you and learn more about what you guys do, and how you could impact some of these listeners and interact with you more. So, I've got my own observations of what I think. We were talking about it earlier, where like a lot of these old school salespeople, they do these gimmicks, and we have to evolve in sales conversations, because the way people buy is constantly evolving. And on top of that, just the generation of buyers now, they're way more informed than they were before. And we know what turns them on or what turns them off. So what are your observations about in today's world, like that maybe the folks that you teach, or just as a consumer yourself, when you're trying to buy something, what are the things that you've observed that most people do in sales that they shouldn't do?
I think if you position yourself as a person who has all the answers, I think you run the risk of them saying BS. There's no person who has all the answers to all the problems. And so I think having some humility and just being clear about what it is that you know versus what it is that you don't know, I think earns a lot of credibility in the client's eyes. I'm trying to think right now. You kind of caught me off guard here about.
I mean, I could tell you that mine is, I don't like when people overly talk.
Yep.
Right. Like listen more than talk. Right. And just be present. But I'll tell you just a quick story. Sorry to interject as you're gathering your thoughts.
That's all good.
I'm getting my haircut, and my barber also happens to be a real estate person, which also happens to get into this like financial, I don't know, what sounds like to me like a Ponzi scheme. The guy's pushing it hard on me because he knows I'm come from a finance background. He's like, and you could do this, and these are the earnings. So let me show you this app. And he just gets overly excited. And at this point, I'm like, I just want to like get this haircut done with, because he hasn't asked me a question at all about my investment strategy. Like, do I have any tolerance? What do I know about this topic? And he just kind of just went into full presentation mode, unsolicited on top of that. And so I was just like, I just hate it when someone just looks at you straight and goes like a freight train with like an information dump, what has nothing to do with what's important to me. So I guess I just wanted to share that I hate that.
That's excellent. Okay, so a couple of things illustrated in your story triggered a couple of memories for me as well. I think a lot of times salespeople are very self-centered. They want something and they focus all of their energy on getting it from you. So oftentimes I feel like, what's in it for me?
Mm.
There, I'll give you an example. Somebody slipped into my DM on Twitter asking me to help promote their product, and they believe there's a good cause. And their follow up, and it's a little incessant, like constantly saying, "Have you thought about it? Have you thought about it?" Even though I told them, I don't know if I want to get involved in this. So they're not even listening to me. And their last piece of communication to me was, "So have you thought about our offer?" And I said the word offer implies mutual exchange and benefit. I think this is a request. You're asking me to do something for you. And it's like, I don't think they even get it. And so being super aggressive, not picking up on signals, and just thinking only about yourself. Like they haven't at any point in our piece of communication said, Chris, I'd like to help you.
Right.
So it's all about them. It's like, how can you improve my life? And you and I have seen this, and it's almost laughable that in our DMs, people just say, Chris, I want to tell you about this opportunity. It begins something like that. And I'm like, how do you even know I'm in the market for this stuff? How do you even know who I am? And so this feels very impersonal and really driven towards getting what you want. And it's a big turnoff for me. It's very clear to me. You have zero interest in my own welfare and in seeing me succeed. And people use funny language too. Here's another one. I think there's an opportunity for us to collaborate.
Mm.
Okay, because maybe that's a 21st century buzzword like collaboration, co-create, co-collaborate, right? And then I ask them very simply, what do you have in mind? And then they go on, and they, in email form, tell me what it is that they want from me. How is this a collaboration?
Right.
That's just another tricky way for you to say, I'd like to sell you something, or I want something from you, but I can't figure out, or I have not even tried to contextualize it for something that might be of benefit to you.
Especially that's like a false intention, right? Like,
yes, it is.
Because I have used that, but with the true intention of actually collaborate. Like, I want to send you business if I can, or I want to expose you to help you get opportunities if I can. But of course, if there's value that I could bring to your audience, etc., there's got to be a true follow-up through that intention. So I was like, when you said that, I cringed a little bit. I was like, I wonder if I should stop using that.
Well, but, if your intentions are good, right, and you actually tell them what you want to do for them. Like, say, for example, you held up my book a couple of times, right? So it's like, maybe you're thinking, Chris, I have an idea on how we can sell 300 of your books. Is that of interest to you? Because if you do X and Y with me, I can put you in front of people that I think they will buy your book based on X, Y, and Z events in the past. That is a collaboration. Like, you've at least put some thought and energy into that. Or you could just do what we've been talking about, which is be very clear in your communication, ask open-ended questions, and not make any assumptions. So here's how that email would go out. I'm a big fan and admirer of what it is that you do. I'm looking for any which way to work with you, whether it be making content, podcast interview, or having you speak an event. I'm not sure what would be valuable to you.
Yeah.
And I would tell you a little bit about me. So if you have an idea, I'd love to see if we can make this work. Yeah. At least when you're being clear, you're being honest, and you're asking a question.
And being a little vulnerable too. I
100%.
think vulnerable is probably the thing that builds trust the fastest. The ability to be authentically vulnerable, to say, look, I'm just new in this game, and I'm hoping, you could help me along the way, and I could help you along the way.
Yeah.
I think that builds trust.
I'll say this, and inevitably somebody in your audience will say, use the exact line, and that's okay. You could literally say this. If you're a brand new person and you're trying to work with someone that you look up to, you can say, I don't know what it is I have that I could even offer you. These are my skill sets, but I would love any opportunity to get in front of you for 15 minutes because I know your time is valuable. And so if you reach this person, whoever it might be, if they're in the right mindset and they have a generous spirit, they might take a few minutes to sit there and think, well, tell me more. Yeah. And that's the best that you can hope for. Yeah. So again, come in kind of in a vulnerable state, arms open, palms up, say, I don't know how I can help you. but I'd like to. Is there any way that we can do something together?
Yeah. And people who have been successful have not done it alone. You know, they've gotten help from mentors and from people who had kind of lifted them up. So one of the, to your point, a bit, having a generous spirit. I'm sure you remember when, before you were where you were, you know, you were helped by many, and I'm sure it's also fulfilling for you to help others. But for those who are kind of jamming with you in that spiritual sense or in that mindset, without the intentions of like, I'm just trying to get something out of this. It's what I'm really trying to get is either a relationship, personal growth, you know, tools, resources that I can grow and be a better person and have a better contribution to the world as a result of it, which you've done an incredible job. And so I've taken a lot more of your time than I asked for, and I'm grateful for it, Chris. If you don't mind, maybe we can plug a little bit around how folks can get in touch with you, learn more about you, your school, and more about the Futur as well as Blind.
Sure. The easiest thing is for anybody who's interested in more is to look me up on social media. I'm on almost every social platform. I'm typically at the Chris Do, and Do is spelled D-O. And if you're curious about this coaching community program that I run, it's called the Futur Pro Group. If you just Google that, it'll take you wherever you need to go. Or you can just DM me, Chris, tell me more about the Futur Pro Group.
Yeah, and I'll be your advocate as well. So if you want to DM me as a current participant and benefactor of the program, I will happily give a wonderful testimonial, which I'm doing right now. I've been listening to all of the recorded calls and just, you know, taking feverish notes and learning a lot.
There's a lot of calls to get through, Carlos, so pace yourself.
Yeah, it's all good. While I have the capacity, I'll do that. But Chris, thanks again for joining. Really appreciate you. Everyone, thank you for listening in. And with that, until next time, and thank you for tuning in.